Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're unraveling a pretty profound philosophical concept. It's one that's going to completely challenge everything we think we know about human motivation. Seriously, we're diving into the hidden engine behind the absolute biggest historical shifts of our time.
Just consider this question for a second. Why do people risk their lives to stand in front of tanks? I mean, if human beings are purely rational calculating machines, what economists like to call rational economic man, who literally only care about survival and maximizing wealth, then risking death makes absolutely no sense, right? If we just care about self-preservation, why fight? There has to be something else, something way deeper, driving us.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to trace the evidence and build out the logical chain of human action step by step. First, we've got beyond reason and desire. Then, the illusion of money. Third, what really sparks revolutions. Fourth, battles for human dignity. And finally, the fall of communism.
All right, starting off with Section 1, Beyond Reason and Desire.
So to really understand human action, we actually need to shatter this deeply ingrained assumption that we're all just purely rational economic actors. We have to understand a concept called thymos. Thymos is this innate human sense of justice. It's basically the psychological seat of all our noble virtues: courage, indignation, selflessness. Think of it like this. People evaluate their own worth, and when that worth isn't recognized by others, we feel this fierce, burning indignation. Basically, thymos is the demand for recognition.
Just look at the clear contrast we have here. On one hand, you have rational desire, that cold, calculating, cost-benefit analysis where we're just trying to maximize our economic gain. But thymos, that is a fiery, completely unquantifiable demand for respect. It's the exact thing that drives people to feel solidarity with others. It proves we aren't just calculators, We're emotional beings who demand to be seen and valued.
Moving right along to Section 2, the illusion of money.
Very often, what looks on the surface like a fight over dollars and cents is actually a disguised demand for dignity. Just listen to the inner monologue of a striking worker. I am a good worker, I am worth much more, my human dignity is being violated. When a union strikes, it's rarely just about getting a little extra cash to pay the mortgage. It's a demand to have their true value recognized by management. And honestly, it's exactly why workers get so intensely furious at strikebreakers. Because a strikebreaker is seen as someone whose desire for immediate cash completely overwhelmed their sense of dignity.
Even the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, understood this perfectly. He pointed out that basic necessities like food and shelter can usually be met by the wages of even the lowest paid laborer. So why keep striving? Because our endless pursuit of wealth isn't actually about physical survival. It's driven by vanity. It's the desire to be noticed, to be attended to, and to be approved of by others. We are literally chasing wealth for recognition.
And this brilliantly illustrates a pretty massive flaw in the philosopher John Locke's logic. So Locke once argued that an English day laborer was better off than a Native American chief simply because the laborer was physically better fed. But he completely missed the whole thematic element. An English day laborer back then was totally dependent and virtually invisible as a human being to his employer. A Native American chief, though maybe worse fed from a strict calorie standpoint, possesses freedom, self-sufficiency, and the deep respect of his community. When it comes down to it, dignity matters far, far more than just calories.
Okay, let's scale this up. Section 3, what really sparks revolutions. So, if dignity drives individual actions, what on earth happens on a societal scale? Now, you might naturally assume that extreme poverty and deprivation cause revolutions, right? But history shows us something entirely different. Absolute poverty, like we saw in the 1980s African South, actually forces people to focus purely on basic survival. But relative poverty, like in pre-revolution France, is what actually ignites societal rebellion. Alexis de Tocqueville found that the French Revolution was preceded by an unprecedented period of economic growth and liberalizing reforms. This prosperity made the middle class acutely aware of their relative deprivation. It wasn't starvation that caused the revolution, it was the acute anger from an affront to their self-worth.
Which brings us to our next link in the chain. Section 4, Battles for Human Dignity. When we look closely, we start to see that major historical conflicts are, fundamentally, thymotic battles over competing visions of justice. Take the American Civil War. Just consider this staggering number, 600,000 deaths. That was almost 2% of the total U.S. population at the time. Some historians try to explain the war purely as a rational economic struggle between the industrializing North and the traditional South. But come on, a simple economic cost-benefit analysis would never, ever justify enduring that much human devastation.
The real driver was profoundly moral and deeply thymotic. Just listen to these incredible words from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. He was willing to see the war continue until the wealth piled by the bondsmen's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with a lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. Wow. Lincoln pursued the war to settle a moral debt of blood. That is a decision only the thymotic part of the human soul can comprehend.
And we absolutely see these thymotic battles in modern times, too. Take the U.S. abortion debate. This is fundamentally an ideological clash over dignity. On one side, there's a fierce defense of the dignity and respect due to traditional motherhood. On the other, a fierce defense of the dignity and equal standing of the working woman. Both sides feel profound, righteous indignation. But notice that there is almost zero economic content in this debate. It's entirely a deep, thymotic battle over competing understandings of justice, rights, and human dignity.
Moving into our final section, Section 5, the fall of communism.
Let's see how our logical chain builds to one of the absolute greatest global shifts in modern history. The collapse of the communist bloc in 1989 wasn't just about failing economies. It was a massive revolution for recognition. During the 1991 Soviet coup, the orchestrators foolishly believed that citizens would prioritize immediate economic gain over their dignity and freedom. As one defender of the Russian parliament brilliantly put it, the coup makers thought people would trade their freedom for a piece of sausage. But they were completely wrong. The people demanded to be treated as human beings with rights, not just subjects to be fed.
Think about this timeline. It actually wasn't grand macroeconomic policy failures that initially brought people to the streets in the late 1980s. It was minor, seemingly incidental injustices that triggered the crumbling of massive governments. In Poland, it was anger over the cover-up of the 1940 Katyn forest massacre. In Czechoslovakia, it was the jailing of playwright Václav Havel. In Romania, protests erupted over a single jailed cleric in Timazora. And in East Germany, the final, fatal blow was the public exposure of leader Erich Honecker's opulent Wandlitz villa.
So the crucial point is this. Honecker's villa wasn't even a Versailles-level palace. It was basically just a comfortable suburban home. But the enormous anger it provoked came from the immense hypocrisy of a regime that explicitly devoted itself to equality. Seeing that villa on their televisions deeply offended the East German people's innate sense of justice. It was a thymotic trigger far, far more powerful than any grand economic policy.
We saw a very similar thymotic drive in the 1989 Chinese student protests. These students were actually reared in a time of unprecedented economic freedom and opportunity under Deng Xiaoping. They weren't starving at all, but they were deeply frustrated by a lack of political voice. They demanded that the government recognize their complaints. Ultimately, they just wanted to be taken seriously and respected as adults by the leadership. It was a really powerful demand for institutionalized recognition.
And that brings us to the conclusion. The courage of thymos.
To summarize our core thesis and lay out the final link in our logical chain about how history actually changes, here is the ultimate showdown. Economic man compromises. He performs logical cost-benefit analyses and always finds a highly rational reason to stay safe and work within the system. But thymotic man? He demands dignity, risks comfort, and literally risks his own life to force structural change. Economic man survives, sure, but it is thymotic man who has the actual courage to step out and change the course of history.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought to reflect on. If history is truly written by the demand for dignity, where in your own life are you settling for a piece of sausage instead of demanding the recognition you deserve? Really think about where you might be compromising your own thymos. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.